I just want to be free.
I can set you free.
Julie, God bless you. I believe that there is possibly no person on earth that has led to this outcome for these sweet and innocent and patriotic people more than you. Because unlike guys like me who sit in a studio all day, you actually went to the courthouse. When these people were anathema, when you couldn't touch them, they were like lepers, right? No, but you couldn't say a single nice thing about them. You couldn't even tweet about them without getting your account deleted.
Yes.
You were actually in the courthouse defending them and doing the reporting. And that started as like a teeny little spark that spread into the wildfire. And so we just want to say congratulations and thank you.
Well, thank you, Benny, because, of course, I was doing the work and going to the courthouse and following the proceedings and hearing from the defendants. But if I couldn't bring my work to a larger audience like yours and others, it would have gone nowhere. So I have to thank you as well for having me on since the very beginning. As you said, when these people were considered lepers, domestic terrorists, insurrectionists, traitors, no one would, as you said, touch them or treat them like human beings. And so I want to thank you and the team for having me on so often and letting me tell these stories to your audience. But also, Benny, have to give a shout out to President Trump. This was not an easy decision to make. It would have been very easy for him to do the low-hanging fruit, the people who are convicted of misdemeanors, leaving the assault charges in place, ignoring them, or say case by case and dragging it out, because you see the blowback that he's getting for that. But he didn't. And I talked to the president last week for about 40 minutes, and he wanted all the details, the updates as to where the caseload was and what was happening with these defendants. So he not only feels an obligation to them, I think politically, but also personally. And so I have to really emphasize that he is the one responsible for this pardon and doing the courageous and compassionate thing here.
So, wow, I did not know this, Julie. There's been a lot that's happened in the last week, but whoa.
I know, congratulations.
It's hard, it's very, like, hard to even catch up, but this is incredible. So you spoke with Trump about this. Mm-hmm. How did that conversation go? I mean, I know that everyone wants to keep, it's important to keep these things private and within and be gentlemanly about it. Yes. But can you give us sort of the overarching, like 35,000 foot perspective? How did that conversation go?
He just really wanted, as I said, sort of the grasp of, the different charges and different groups of defendants. And as I said, he spoke repeatedly about doing this sort of blanket pardon. And he felt very strongly about it. Again, I don't want to get into details. And of course, you respect that as someone who talks to the president. But he really just wanted sort of the, as I said, the details of the status of the caseload, what was happening. So I think that animated his thinking as to how to proceed. But it was very clear that this is what he wanted to do. And no one was convincing him to do otherwise, including myself. So, but I also think he understood the political blowback that he was already getting from some Republican senators, especially getting that today and earlier this week. So, but nonetheless, again, did the right thing. And so that's why I really have to commend him. I mean, Benny, you know this, he's been meeting with these J6 families and their children for over 2 years. So he's talked to them personally. He has brought them to Mar-a-Lago. He understands what they have been through, unlike Senator Tom Tillis or unlike Lisa Murkowski, who are out there now running their mouths saying they oppose these pardons for people who assaulted police. These are your constituents. These are people who were brutally targeted, prosecuted, and imprisoned by Joe Biden's DOJ. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump is the bad guy here. Shame on them. Tom Tillis especially should face a very strong primary opponent for a number of reasons, but especially what he has said before and after these pardons. They have no grasp of what's been happening here. None of them covered any of these J6 court proceedings. They wouldn't even meet with their own constituents. I know that also. And here they are hanging them out to dry once again. So thank you, President Trump. And thank you. Wow, what a story from Angelo. What an articulate young man, really sad to hear his story, but good for him. These people are so resilient and still love their country no matter what has happened to them. And so thank you for having those J6ers on so they could share their stories.
Yeah, we want to do more. We want to do more. I mean, we've been like, it's been building up, you know, the last couple of days. We want to bring more on, and I think we're going to bring on a J6 political prisoner pardoned every single day this week. And we have a whole Rolodex of individuals that we've met at various events and various conferences who always come up and like tell their stories. And it's this is the time, I think, to make sure that, one, President Trump gets the credit, and then that people understand the true horrors of all of this. Is something that obviously you've come on this show, and so I have to ask, what did you tell the president, right? Like, when he asked about this, what's the argument? You've made it on the show before, but there's nobody more articulate than you on it because there's nobody who's seen it up close more. Give me the rock solid Tom Tillis wetting his pants. It makes you wonder what they have on this guy. I mean, honestly, Julie, I mean, it makes you wonder, like, how compromised is this dude? Like, why is he going so hard in the paint for this thing that's already done? You know, it's like, this guy's a real scumbag. He's like clearly being operated. But okay, give me the rock solid argument for these pardons that nobody can that nobody can tear down.
Well, what was articulated during our discussion, and as I have articulated for a long time, and as the president knows himself, is the rigged legal and judicial system in our nation's capital, where they used bogus charges, including a post-Enron obstruction charge, Benny, as you know, that was overturned by the Supreme Court in June. They unlawfully prosecuted hundreds of people on that post-Enron obstruction statute that the Supreme Court said, no. This is not for interrupting a government proceeding. This is for tampering or destroying documents related to an investigation. That was overturned. And then these ridiculous, even these assault charges, Benny, usually, and look, clashes between police and protesters happen during political demonstrations all the time, especially in Washington. When that does happen, that protester usually is taken to Superior Court, which is the local court in Washington, gets a ticket, and goes on with their lives. Many of them face deferred plea agreements. That is not what happened here. Again, federal statutes uniquely and unprecedentedly applied only to J6ers, federal assault, interfering, or obstructing with officers, not even law enforcement, officers, another statute that was abused. And then, of course, all of the misdemeanor charges and convictions that have never been used this way, political protesters who go into a building unauthorized or disrupt a Senate hearing, they're hauled away, slap on the wrist, $50 ticket. They're not charged with 4 or 5 federal misdemeanors, resulting in going to federal prison for months or up to a year, which is exactly what we've seen here. So it is the unequal application of justice, abuse of the law, refusing to move these trials out of Washington, D.C., and then imposing excessive prison sentences, using terror enhancements, even on nonviolent offenders, to make sure that these people spend years in prison.
I physically stood in an elevator with my home state senator, Chuck Grassley, when during the Kavanaugh hearings, angry, liberal, wine mom, cat ladies with shirts that say I've had 21 abortions on them, stormed into the elevator to attack Chuck Grassley. I have it on my camera. I have video of it. I stood next to Rand Paul after Donald Trump's speech at the RNC in 2020. Right. It was an interesting speech because it was at the White House, right? It was COVID protocol, so they had it outside of the White House. And we were walking out of the White House, and I watched Rand Paul get savagely beaten with his wife by these left-wing orcs who are physically attacking for the purpose of killing United States senators. And no one went to prison. Nobody went to jail. Nobody was even charged, as far as I know, Julie, for these literal attacks on United States senators by violent left-wing mobsters, orcs, and goblins. And it makes my blood boil to this day. I hope and I pray that the Trump administration, when this inevitably happens and the mob is reactivated, right, that like these that we've learned our lessons, and that these protesters who do attack with the intent to kill and to damage and to hurt and to burn down, I hope that they get the literal book thrown at them.
Well, here's what has to happen, Benny. We have a new DC U.S. Attorney, Ed Martin, who you may know. He's a friend of mine. He is a devout conservative, ran the Phyllis Schlafly Institute, a very good attorney. He has taken over for Matthew Graves. So here's what has to happen. The next time a bunch of crazy leftists disrupt a Senate hearing, or they start to demonstrate in Washington against immigration policies as migrants, immigrants, illegals are being deported. Once that happens, then the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, we have a precedent now. You get federal obstruction charges, you get federal civil disorder charges, you get federal misdemeanors. You're not going to Superior Court. You're going into the federal courthouse. You're going to face federal charges. Doesn't matter where you live, every proceeding is going to be in Washington. We're going to throw the book at you, and then we're going to sentence you to prison for years on federal offenses never before applied before January 6th, but new rules. That's how it goes.
New rules. And, it sucks because if you are a lib, this sucks because Republicans don't actually often or ever really demonstrate in Washington, D.C. This is like kind of the op here, right? This was the first time there was a very large march in D.C. for the right, really just people that wanted the Constitution upheld. And so the vast preponderance of protests in Washington, D.C., especially the unlawful ones that raged for months in 2020, are left-wing. And so good luck. Like, you're not going to be able to reverse that reflex the first time that, this is going to happen again, whether it's Hamas, the Hamas protest, whatever it is. And, man, it's going to be, I will be cheering it on. I'll say, yeah, you know what? Tough luck. You blocked a senator from getting into an elevator, you're going to prison for 22 years. Exactly. Yeah, because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've literally watched it with my own eyes. The difference, I think, is that if allowed into the Capitol, left-wing protesters would have burned it to the ground. One of my most viral videos ever was 5 years ago when I interviewed people outside of the White House that were protesting Donald Trump, and I asked them what they would want to do if they caught Donald Trump. And every one of them said they'd murder Trump. Everyone. Openly talking about the reason we're storming the White House is to murder and kill Trump. And to burn it down. To burn the White House down. So, on the level, that's what these people are. That's who they are. That's what's in their hearts. They're not peaceful, beautiful sweethearts like Jacob Chansley, who just wanted to say a prayer and be really happy and hug the officers, which is what that man did.
Yes, he
actually. Yeah. It's gonna, yeah. I hope for it, right? Bring on the first protest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely. And to your point, Benny, what happened in the summer of 2020 was just 6 months before January 6th. It wasn't 6 years. All of this had been happening. Federal police officers attacked, assaulted by protesters, federal property destroyed. They tried to scale the fences at the White House, resulting in the lockdown of the White House in June of 2020. This is 6-7 months before January 6th. It's not like it was far, a long time ago. Not only were all those cases dropped, the same DC U.S. Attorney, Matthew Graves, entered into an agreement with BLM protesters who were suing the police for excessive force. He dropped all of the charges and then entered into an agreement and criticized police for their handling of the mobs in May and June of 2020. J6ers who yelled at a police officer, grabbed a baton, grabbed a riot shield, screamed at a cop who was probably assaulting another protester. No, they get the book thrown at them, pretrial detention, excessive charges, excessive sentences, rotting in federal prisons across this country for years.
It'll be nice to see this reversal, and I just can't wait. I'm going to do my very best to tell libs. I'm going to tweet every single day, libs, it's time to go march on DC and protest. And please, go. I'm very much looking forward to this. All January 6th political prisoners are not yet free. Perhaps you could inform me if I'm incorrect here, but based on the available reporting that I've seen, the DC federal courthouse, the DC federal prison is still holding some J6 political prisoners in spite of this pardon. Can you give us an update on the totality of the releases?
I think most of them have been released. I'm trying to get updates in between the interviews and everything that's going on. But I did just post this, Benny. Mm-hmm. These judges are not going down without a fight because this has been their life's work for 4 years. This is their big achievement as judges is overseeing the so-called Capitol siege investigation. They have thrown their blood, sweat, and tears into even minor misdemeanor cases. And so what I just posted, and so they're foot dragging. So Judge Tim Kelly, for example, he forced one J6er to stay in prison for an extra night while he delayed dismissing vacating his detention order. He still hasn't dismissed the case, as he should. You have another one, Judge Colleen Kolar-Catelli, 6-page rant she just filed this morning, that none of this erases what happened on January 6th. Nothing will change the facts here. All the police officers who died after January 6th, a full out lie. So she just issued this 6-page rant, and then she finally had to concede that she had to dismiss the case. Reggie Walton, another one with a footnote. I'll be posting that later. A footnote saying, well, yes, we were forced to dismiss this case only because of the president's order, but here's all the charges. Here's what happened in this case. So they're doing that so they can help the media continue to shape the narrative of January 6th, that all these dangerous cop killers and dangerous cop assaulters have been let free by Donald Trump. So these judges working till the last minute to torment these J6ers as long as they can, and then what they think is have the final word. Well, they can't have the final word, Benny, because as you and I have talked about, those are the real villains in the J6 prosecution. Nothing happens without their imprimatur. They need to be held accountable. We need to hold hearings. They need to be investigated for, yes, possibly conspiring to deny the rights of American citizens, because they are as guilty, if not worse so, than the prosecutors who brought these charges.
So just really quickly here, because I know we're up against a hard out. These judges, what happens next? How do you disrobe, disbar? I'm not even sure what the actual term is. I've seen some photos of these judges. I don't want them to disrobe. But how do you?
No, you don't.
Okay, but whatever the correct legal term is for it, what's the process of doing that? Now, I know what Mike Davis would say, right? Like lock them all up in Guantanamo Bay,
right?
I'm aware, I got it. Okay, got it, Mike. But
right.
What's the next step that needs to happen from a legal perspective to ensure not just the judges, but Matthew Graves? Are there going to be civil lawsuits against Merrick Garland, the Department of Justice? How can the pain be brought now by these people, either from the inside or outside, to ensure that equal and appropriate pain is visited upon those who created these crimes?
So Matthew Graves, the former DC U.S. attorney, absolutely has to be investigated, as well as his prosecutors. And I would start with using that unlawful 1512C2, how they continued to apply it when they knew that it was wrong, how they continued to bring the charge even after the Supreme Court granted cert in the Fisher case that signaled that they were going to reverse how DOJ was using it. And then after the Supreme Court reversed it, continue to hold people in custody on that conviction, even though the Supreme Court reversed it. So that would be one. Also conspiring, of course, and working with these judges to deny change of venue motions, forcing every trial to go before DC juries, looking at potential of juror recycling in those cases. That's one thing I've heard from defense attorneys. Think of how small Washington, D.C. is. They've held up to 160 trials in that town in the past 3 years. So there is a lot that can be investigated there. The judges, look, Republicans don't have the guts to impeach a single judge, even the worst offenders. But my understanding is that Congress can reassign those judges outside of Washington or put them on the Superior Court handling local crimes, demote them as much as you possibly can, force them to retire, including some of them who can't even get out of their chair, like Royce Lambert, the Reagan appointee, and get some new blood in there.
And the new U.S. District Attorney, can you, I know he follows us on X, and it's an honor. I hope that he'll come on the show. Can you give us, because he's your friend, can you give us just a quick overview of what life's going to be like for criminals in Washington, D.C. now?
Well, what I do think is going to happen is that the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, hopefully, now that they're done with the J6 cases, will focus on the violent crime wave that's still ongoing in Washington that Matthew Graves is responsible for. He declined roughly 2/3 of all charges brought by local police in Washington because he was using all of his resources for the January 6 cases. So now that that's gone, you can have prosecutors, you can have police working together to stem this crime wave in Washington. Carjackings, robberies, murders, drive-by shootings, everything that's happening in Washington, terrorizing the people who live there. So hopefully there'll be a redirection of resources there because that's what they need to make our nation's capital safe, which I know is something the president wants as well.
Yes. I mean, I sent him a DM last night and I said, there's this criminal that I see on video that pulled a fire alarm. His name is Jamal Bowman. You should maybe consider like locking him up. And then there's this lady who's like an insider trader named Nancy Pelosi, and she's also an inside traitor, and she possibly both crimes could be prosecuted by the U.S. District Attorney. And I have the documentation for all of it. It's all on video, and
Right.
so maybe he can start there.
That's a good idea.
Okay,
I like
thank
it.
you, Julie. I love hearing it's a good idea from Julie Kelly. Just one of the smartest, nicest people, actually. So Battle Axe on our program. She's just one of our dear friends, and we love her. Julie Kelly. Everybody go follow. Obviously, on her way to 1,800,000 people. Can't be wrong. Declassified with Julie Kelly. Godspeed and congratulations, Julie. What an incredible curse that has been lifted over our country.
And congratulations to you and Kate for baby number 4. Talk to you
See ya.
soon. Thanks.